On this episode of Lost Gems, a long-lost franchise from a forgotten line of Commodore computers, we're talking Shadow of the Beast on Lost Gems, Episode 10. The Shadow of the Beast franchise. Chances are you've never heard of it, or at the most saw previews of it in gaming magazines of the early 90s. It was a franchise that helped define a classic line of computers that arose in the mid-80s and early 90s, the Commodore Amiga. The Amiga was a personal computer that ran on the Motorola 68000 chipset. That's the same chipset that was used to power the Sega Genesis and the original line of Macintosh computers. It was also used in the development of tons of arcade titles throughout the mid to late 80s. The Amiga was graphically superior to all other computers of its time. It was powerful enough that the first season of the sci-fi epic show Babylon 5 was developed on it. But that's enough about the Amiga. Let's move on to today's Lost Gem.
The Shadow of the Beast franchise was developed by Reflections Interactive and was first released for the Amiga back in 1989. The game follows your character as the Beast. In the story, you are kidnapped by the Beast Lord Maltoth. Under his rule, you've been twisted and controlled by his magic and are transformed into a hideous beast. Years later, you witness an execution and realize that the man that was executed is your father. With your memories re-emerging, you rebel against the Beast Lord to reclaim your humanity. Upon its release, Beast was praised for its amazing and groundbreaking multi-layered graphics. Not only did Beast 1 have a ton of graphics on screen, but it had over 10 scrolling parallax layers. When the player could move either left or right, you would see everything move at different speeds. The ground would move with you, the clouds flew overhead, and the trees blurred past you. The box art of the game was designed by artist Roger Dean, and the game's environment carried a very similar art style. Roger Dean is best known for his album artwork for bands like Yes and Asia. However, it wasn't just the graphics that captivated the gaming audience. The game's difficulty was what stole everyone's attention while playing. Game critics blasted Beast for its lack of a continuous system or extra lives. If you thought the new Ninja Gaiden games were tough, then you need to try out Beast 1. The game was unforgiving, and it only allowed a player to have 12 hit points to start the game, and health potions were far and few in between. Aside from the difficulty level and graphics, Beast 1 also contained an amazing soundtrack that was composed by David Whittaker. Whittaker was best known for composing his music by actually programming it into the games instead of using musical tools. Other games to his credit included Lazy Jones, Obliterator, Xenon, and Speedball. However, it's been agreed upon that his score for Beast was considered to be his best work. After a while, Beast was ported to just about every computer and game console in existence. The most notable ports were on the Sega Genesis, the PC Engine, and the Super Nintendo. The PC Engine version is considered by far the best port, and it's practically impossible to find. The port for the Genesis suffered some issues. While the game had better graphics, the audio was almost unbearable, and the game's speed was clocked up to 60 Hz. This increased the speed of the game a bit and made it nearly impossible to beat. The Super Nintendo port was renamed Super Shadow of the Beast, and it was vastly different from the other versions. In Super Shadow of the Beast, it had revamped levels, murkier graphics, new enemies, and a completely different musical score. Overall, it seemed like a completely different game. However, I would consider Super Shadow of the Beast to be the worst out of all the ports, and it should be overlooked. In 1990, Reflections released Shadow of the Beast 2 for the Amiga. In Beast 2, your character is now human and has set forth to rescue your baby sister from the evil clutches of Zelek. Beast 2 had many changes made to its gameplay and graphics. The sequel continued the Roger Dean-inspired graphical landscapes, but it lacked the multiple parallax scrolling levels that was in the first. The game's musical score was also written by Tim Wright, who composed music for games like Lemmings, The Killer Game Show, and later on Wipeout. The new gameplay elements in Beast 2 included interacting with NPCs, having multiple weapons, and puzzle-solving challenges. Beast 2's difficulty, however, was even higher than the first. Damage intake was now measured by a health potion on the screen, and the only way to replenish it was by finding or buying potions. There were a ton of segments in the game that dealt a ton of damage no matter how skilled the player was. Aside from damage intake, the puzzle segments were considered to be the hardest part of the game. Some of the game's puzzles were really elaborate and could only be done once, and if you didn't get it right the first time, you would have to start the game over. Unfortunately, one of the biggest flaws of Beast 1 made its way into Beast 2, which was the lack of a continuous system or extra lives. However, this would be rectified by certain ports of the game. Beast 2 was only ported to a small number of computers and consoles this time around. The Atari ST and Sega Genesis version retained the look and gameplay of the original, while the Sega CD and Towns FM computer version had major improvements. These improvements included better graphics, voice acting, new musical score, and FMVs. Other improvements included a toned-down difficulty for certain segments in the game and the inclusion of extra lives. Overall, the Sega CD and FM Towns versions were considered the best out of all the ports. Shadow of the Beast 3 was released 2 years after Beast 2 and turned out to be the swan song of the franchise. In 1992, the rest of the gaming industry caught up with the same level of graphics of the first two Beast games and in several cases surpassing them. Beast 3 still had high-quality graphics and even re-included the parallax scrolling layer system from the first Beast game, but compared to 2D platformers of the same time, it was hardly the best-looking game. Tim Wright also returned to score the game once more and delivered a stellar soundtrack, but according to some fans, it wasn't nearly as great as Beast 2's score. The story of Shadow of the Beast 3 followed you on your travels as you went to distant worlds to collect artifacts to once and for all defeat the Beast Lord Maltoth. Beast 3's gameplay was similar to that of Beast 2 minus NPC interaction and a brand new weapon for the player, a giant ninja-like throwing star. The game was split up into 4 different worlds and each had an objective to be obtained. Each world had a boss awaiting you at the end and you had to solve some brilliant puzzles in order to get there. In fact, the puzzle elements of this game are considered to be the best and most inventive of the franchise. However, one of the issues of Beast 2 remained in this one. Some of the puzzles could only be attempted once, and if you screwed up you had to start over. But thankfully, Reflections finally answered the prayers of all their fans and included 3 lives for the player in order for them to continue their game, without having to start over. Unfortunately, Beast 3 did not receive as much attention as its 2 predecessors and was never ported to any other system. It was easily missed by tons of people who at the time were making the switch from the Amigas to a standardized PC, which proved to be more efficient, due to the brand new 32-bit 486 motherboards and a brand new operating system called Windows. Reflections moved on to other products and new properties, most notably Destruction Derby and Driver. In late 1999, Reflections was bought by Atari, and they continued to release the Driver series for the PS1 and the PlayStation 2. In 2004, the founder of Reflections left and the company was sold to Ubisoft. Ubisoft would later rename them Ubisoft Reflections, and they would continue to release Driver games for them, with a brand new one on the way in 2010.
Now, as far as we know, the Beast Saga was planned as a trilogy, and there are no plans to revive the franchise. The fact that the series was originally developed for a retired line of computers would make it hard to port to any of today's current systems. And as for a sequel, Ubisoft Reflections has shown no indication or interest of doing one so far. For what it's worth, however, the Shadow of the Beast franchise will always be remembered for giving gamers some of the best eye candy of the early 90s and some of the most challenging gameplay ever released. Thank you for watching this episode of Lost Gems, and I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to stop by our website and check out our latest podcasts and articles. The website is gamingvisionnetwork.blogspot.com. This is Fight Club Hub signing off, telling you to keep on gaming.